Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we have a very interesting guest on, Chris Incorvati. And Chris, you are the Chief Technology Officer at Jack's Family Restaurants. And I think you'll tell us a little bit more about Jack's, but you have 70 plus locations. It's a big job that you have. What we're going to be talking about today is a revolution, the digital kitchen, and how it's really revolutionized the restaurant industry, the QSR industry, and what changes have been made and what we need to think about and be doing as technologists leading technology inside of our organizations. So we're going to talk about that. But I would love to first talk a little bit about you. You actually aren't a technologist by trade. You started out in operations inside of restaurants. And so it's interesting because in our conversation, I could really tell that you had very much an operations focus on all the kind of the Q&A and the discussion that we had, as well as technology. And I learned something really interesting. I thought I was the crazy person with 5 dogs, but you've got 10. If you could expand a little bit more on your background before we get started in talking about the digital kitchen.
Sure. Thanks for having me. First off, it's fun to be here and have this conversation. So my background, I got a degree in journalism. I wanted to be a sports writer as a kid. I loved sports and grew up in that world. And then I fell in love with restaurants, became an operator. I was an operator right out of high school and kept working through college and worked my way through a bunch of different opportunities and learned a lot about the restaurant industry. And then an opportunity came about to get involved in training when I was with Legal Seafoods in Boston and rolling out a new point of sale system. And I really just fell in love with it. It was a passion that I had. It was not only improving the experience for both the operators, but the guests alike. And it was this fun thing that I got to do what I was really passionate about, which is serving folks in the best way possible and being that servant leader and really learning a lot about both sides of the industry. Ever since then, I've been involved in IT, and then here I am today. So it's been a really unique opportunity. So blessed to be here.
So here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to start out with all of that background. And before we get into the digital transformation that's happening inside of QSR restaurants, I'd love to talk just about the role that you have, a chief technology officer. And it's amazing because I've talked to a lot of your peers, and sometimes we can feel like we're more of a support department looked upon that way, that we don't have a seat at the table. But if the network's not up and running, the business isn't up and running, and how we can not only support it just being up and running, but how we support almost every bit of the operations of the entire business itself. I'd love to hear your version of that and how as CTOs, we really can win a seat at the table.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a voice. Obviously, a lot of times people do view it as a support role in some aspects because you're trying to keep the business going because the operators are the ones running the business, but give insights into what are the best practices, what are some of the new technologies coming, and to understand how we can best impact and improve the experience for both the operator and the guest alike. It's super important to have the experience and to give that voice to our leaders to share that vision and to understand exactly what they're trying to accomplish, because sometimes they might not have the forethought or understanding of certain things that maybe I've talked to someone about, or a peer, or I've learned something in a conference, or I've done some education that might bring some forethought to the table to help us to best put us in position to succeed. So I think sometimes, and at Jax, I'm very fortunate here. We've got some great leadership and we're very passionate about the industry and we share great ideas across the board and everyone's listening and open to new ideas and challenges. So it's been a great experience here so far. But yeah, it's very important. I think as we expand into this digital age in this world right now, there's so much changing every day. And so to have that input and give some feedback, not only about the experience, but also from a security perspective too. There's so much going on and so many challenges day to day.
So you brought up something really important there that I want to talk about, but two facets of kind of seat at the table and how we help the organization. You brought up CX and you talked about how your passion was serving people, and so much at restaurants, the customer experience drives so much of loyalty, repeat business, revenue. So there's not only just the downtime, there's the cold hard KPIs that the CEO and the board looks at in terms of revenue and retention and NRR and things like that. So how do you think about your role impacting both revenue and CX? I'd love to get your answer on both of those fronts if I could.
Yeah, no, I think from a revenue perspective, it's important that we look for the best solutions that help us to make us more profitable, make us improve speed of service, to provide the best opportunity to capture that revenue, whether it's through implementation of a program or a loyalty or guest intervention to make it seamless. But the best technology is the technology that's not even realized. It's not even there. So the operators continue to do their job. The guest doesn't notice it's there. It's flawless, but the experience is great. And so that's really where you're making your mark. And so constantly trying to evolve that process and make sure we're getting the results that we hope to achieve and achieve those goals. And then from a CX perspective, it's maintaining the diligence to make sure we're doing things the right way and to make sure we're protecting everybody involved from our company, all the way for all of our employees and all of our guests alike. And then making sure that our experience is one that's not only safe, but it just works the way it should and it produces great outcomes.
Now, there's been a ton of changes in the last decade.
Mm.
Technology changes, AI changes, and I know that the leadership in your organization is looking at you and saying, what do we do with this? What do we do with this digital transformation that we're going through? What do we do with AI? What is your point of view of like take us back, where were we 10 years ago versus now in your mind, and then how we should be thinking about how we move forward?
I think it's been such a data revolution. 10 years ago, we were focused solely on hospitality. And I think things have changed in this digital era. Since COVID, I think digital explosion happened and there's been so much change. And now we're looking so much at data and personalization and then understanding all this AI that's coming out. It's still evolving. And I don't think anything's quite hit the mark yet, but it's getting closer every day. It's important to evaluate all these solutions to understand what's going to be the best fit. And eventually, it's already become part of our day-to-day now, whether it be through ChatGPT or looking at some other AI solution or on your phone, getting information. But I think it helps us to be more efficient. And that's really where I think the role of AI comes into play. It's efficiencies, whether it's understanding the inventory model and telling you, hey, based on what you have on hand, this is what you need to look at. We're providing operators our information about what are the key metrics that you need to be aware of. And you maybe hear something to point out to them so they don't have to search for it, making their day-to-day much easier for them. So ongoing process as we go through this, I know a lot of companies are looking at drive-through AI. Something that we're passionate about is drive-through at Jax. We do a great job of it. But how do we make it more efficient? Whether it's through upsell or accuracy or understanding what are the things that make a more personalized experience to that guest, because maybe we have that data and we can look at that to try to give them a better experience. So all those things come into play really when you're looking at how so much has changed in 10 years. It is amazing what has gone on in this industry.
It's funny, I chuckle because I went through my first AI experience at a QSR drive-through where it was very obvious that it was AI. And from the customer's perspective and experience, I was intrigued. I could tell it wasn't a real person. And so it wasn't faking that it was a real person. I thought, oh, wow, is this the wave of the future? Is this what's going to happen? Or is it less manpower that's needed? Is going to get us through the line quicker? Boom, all the things started happening. In your mind, there's the title of the series we're on is The Digital Kitchen. Tell us a little bit about, from a technology perspective, you mentioned alerts on inventory levels and efficiencies and things like that. Where do you see the biggest changes happening in the restaurant industry? We're calling the digital kitchen.
I think, it's going to become more and more data central. It's pointing out the things like I talked about a little bit before, but it's also getting more involved. Like from a day to day, you're not going to have to search for information. It's going to be presented to you. Here's where your opportunities are. Here are the things that are going to get better. And the guest experience is going to be so customizable that when they come in, they're going to know so much about that guest that you're going to give them this premium experience that make it so much easier for them. You're going to know their birthday. You're going to know what they like to eat. If they forgot to order a certain dessert they get most of the time, and say, hey, did you want to throw in that cookie that you might have got last time? Because we know you usually like that cookie. And I think that those things are going to make it much more operationally flawless. I think it'll help and just more efficient. I don't think that the role of AI eliminates labor. I think that's a concern for not only the consumer, because they look at it as a very negative thing sometimes, saying, hey, it's going to eliminate jobs. I don't think it does that. I think it just makes it more efficient and it helps you to get through the day to day a little bit better. So it's more of a tool, an enhancement tool. And I think that's the way I look at it. A drive-through in particular, I think the experience has to be more conversational. It has to be more real because it's going to be uncomfortable if it's more robotic. I think that the big thing that can do to prove an ROI is to improve order accuracy, upsell opportunity, because the person at drive-through, as good as they might be, they're never going to upsell 100% of the time. It becomes tedious. And if you're busy, that person's moving all the time. the AI won't think about it. They won't even have to. It just will automatically try to upsell that individual. And then based on knowing the information about the individual based on loyalty, they can really customize that experience where the human might not be able to do that as effectively. So I think that's where it comes in. But you're always going to need that person to give the bag and to take the credit card information or take the cash at the drive-through. So I think it's going to evolve over time. It'll be really interesting to see where things go. But data is just, it's untapped what we'll be able to do in the future.
So that data, it goes across the network, which you're in charge of making sure is up and resilient and always there, like unbreakable connectivity. And I know that there can be point of sale and even you can take credit cards, even if the network goes down. But everything that you're 95% of making that number up of what you're talking about is reliant on the network. And so tell us a little bit about how you think about resiliency on the network and making sure that it's up and running. And are you using multiple ISPs and bringing them in? And what are you doing to create resiliency in your networks?
Sure. It's funny. So I'm originally from the Northeast and we never had as many storms as we have down here in Birmingham. And it's a little wild in the Southeast. So the storms knock out electricity or in these really small towns. And if someone hits a telephone pole by accident, and I swear it happens once a month, it's wild, but then it knocks out the electricity. So we're constantly thinking about what is the backup solution? Do we have power in the store as a backup? Whether it's a generator or maybe it's just a power supply to keep the terminal up a little extra longer to get through, but also making sure that the system works offline. If it needs to, if there is an ISP outage and we can't get internet for whatever reason, we look at it as a kind of a overall a redundant solution. We try to put in a solution that one has offline capability, two, from an ISP perspective, we've got not only the primary, but then we have some kind of backup solution in place in case the main gets knocked offline so that we can keep our teams running optimally all the time. But sometimes it just doesn't happen. Something will happen and take the system offline. So we just want to be ready so that we can keep the operation flowing. And that's really the main goal. And then that data will catch up over time. So we're looking for something. We just instituted a new point of sale system. It's a cloud-based system. So as soon as the system does get knocked offline, as soon as it comes back on, it feeds the data really quickly and then we catch back up and we've got our reporting and metrics in place. But yeah, it's challenging now because you're right. All of the systems rely on talking to the internet.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that it's redundant as we can. So with storms, it just makes it a little more difficult in the South, but it's not that hard. I think when you think about it, it's just a matter of making sure that you're doing everything you can to keep those stores online. And our internet, sometimes you look at a cellular backup here in the South, and sometimes we're in these small towns and they don't have the best signal. So we just try to make sure we do everything we can to set them up for success.
It's interesting because I think that you brought up wireless in. Well, I just read the wireless carriers have invested over $700 billion. They're on track to invest way over $1 trillion in wireless. And there's a lot of folks that I talk to on the podcast here that have a number of ISPs come in and that the wireless, especially in lots of rural areas, there's low satellite, there's all kinds of ways to provide backup that you can stack these different ISPs together. Is that something that you look at or you're already employing?
Yeah, for our solutions, we look at a multi-carrier SIM card so that if one of them goes down, we've got another one there and we have a backup device so that if we are on primary for cellular, we have another backup in case the hardware goes down. So yeah, redundancy is key. And we've got to try to do as much as we can to keep, again, the stores online.
You mentioned inside of the digital kitchen training as one of the major benefits of kind of this digital transformation that we're going through. If you could explain that a little bit. I don't think we've touched on that yet.
Yeah, so from a training perspective, so many things are changing the day to day. All of the systems can mimic a live environment, but one of the coolest things I've seen so far is some of the AR training where you can put on goggles and you're looking inside of a restaurant and you're actually making food at the station that you'd be working at, and it's giving you step-by-step instructions. So for employees who are going into a new operation, they can mimic the entire location like it's just there. The thing about this that's so impactful is that they're not on their phone. They're completely immersed in this environment. So there's very little distraction and they're just focused on this opportunity. And so when they get to the environment, it's like riding your bike. You're there and it's just like you were just there. So it's really amazing what you can do. And so much is evolving in that space. And I think that's just such untapped potential right now.
You actually mentioned that you also took your team, the technology team, out and into the restaurants and talked to the operators and really gave them an education on what was happening and the impact that your team and your department has. Tell us a little bit about that and why you did that, because I think everybody should be doing that.
I think that's super important to connect. And so years ago when I was with Panera, we had a little bit of a disconnect with one of my teams, and they didn't understand operations. They weren't operators. They're very technical, very smart, well-educated folks, and they did some amazing things. But sometimes understanding the impact of downtime, or if they had to reset something during the day, they didn't understand what that was. So I took them out to meet a general manager and area director, and I said, "Hey, would you folks mind explaining to my team what happens if the system goes down? What is the impact and what happens?" And jaws hit the floor. Like, oh my God, I'm impacting that much and this doesn't work. And I think it energized my team to be better. It inspired them to do more because they realized what an impact they were having for these operators and the guests and their experiences. And so I think everyone should do that exercise, take their teams out to the stores and just meet the operators and walk through, what the day-to-day happens, how they use the systems, what are the tools they look at the most, and how do they get the most out of it? And then just understanding, yeah, if I make this change and they think to them, the IT professional thinks, oh, that's not going to impact them that much. Maybe it will. And so really explaining what that impact is was really impactful, but such a powerful tool to have those conversations and educate people on what that is. I'll tell you that I think some of the best experience I've walked out of those conversations and people come back and have great ideas about how they can change the way that they deploy changes or how they can more quickly support the operators. And one of the things that I've always told my teams, and I'm very passionate about this, is we support the operators, not the other way around. Work for them. So when they call us, it's drop everything, listen to what they need, try to provide them with the best white glove support we can because they're making the money. They're the ones on the front lines dealing with the guests, dealing with the systems in front of them, trying to provide the best experience and hospitality for those individuals.
I'm thinking back, you tell me if I'm making the right link or not, but taking your folks out and giving them that exposure and seeing how much they impact, I can only imagine that translated into stories and ways that you articulated the value of how you do impact them at the C-suite level. Like, I'm sure that helped because part of when we first started out was talking about how do we advocate for ourselves? How do we actually get that seat at the table? The more that we can tell the stories about how we impact the operators and the revenue and the organization. So did I make the right link there? Was that not only a good training exercise for your team, but was it also a good story to be able to tell about in overall about how you impact the business?
Absolutely. I think at one point we would push really hard to get changes out and to make changes because it was being driven at the top level to say we need to be more efficient, we need to get more done, we need to implement more, we need to be more innovative. But when you experience that, the team came back and said, can we slow down? Not in a way that's we don't want to slow the impact of change, but maybe we can do things a little bit better with a little bit more intention and get a little bit more support to make sure that we're doing it right for the operator. And so that experience in itself, and when we did that, we produced better results. The systems were better, they were maintained better, we had better buy-in from everyone. And so, yeah, you get the nail on the head, as he said. It was like, just like it clicked. And I think that those are the things that are really impactful for people. When you have better communication, it's really important.
It is also the kind of thing that nobody like C-suite level is going to say, oh, this is what our operators need. Yeah, no, don't worry about that. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about AI because the big thing about AI across all industries is the idea of human in the loop and not giving up the human connection. And you talked about the human aspect of hospitality. And if you could talk a little bit more about that in terms of how you're thinking about evolving the technology and the use of AI, but are you thinking at it on a parallel path about how it empowers the human operators? Or is it going to take a portion of their requirements away so they can focus on other higher priority things? Like, how are you thinking about that?
I think this is a great conversation right now in the industry in general. I think people are talking about the focus, bringing hospitality back. So what happened, we were in the COVID, everyone kind of went to this digital platform, no talking, like just executing. People don't answer the phones. It went very dark for a while. And from that perspective, for COVID, it was really a difficult time. And I think the digital channels exploded. And yeah, at this point in time, I think now people are saying, you know what? People really miss that experience. And if you talk to Gen Z, they're all about experience now. They're going back into the restaurants. There's hang out with their friends. They want to experience things. They want to have that great interaction with people. And a lot of that generation missed that for that 5 year period. They grew up in this world where they didn't get to mingle or have those conversations or go out and hang out with their friends. Now I think it's so more important that we really focus on that hospitality, giving that great experience. But yes, to your point, the AI or some of this new technology through digital platforms needs to be able to supplement the worker to help them to make it easier for them, whether it be identifying an individual or knowing their preferences or helping them to succeed by in our kitchens, being able to provide food prep details because you know what you sold and it can say, hey, you need to prep these items and make sure that you've got them prepared for dinner because that's coming in a few hours. Forecasting, all these amazing tools that we can use. So I think it is a healthy balance, but I think at the end of the day, like at Jack's here, we're all about hospitality. We talk about Southern hospitality down here in Birmingham. And I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of time here. I love the people down here. There's nothing like Southern hospitality. It's just people are so friendly and heartwarming, and it makes a difference. And I think if people strive, they thrive for connection. And so you can never give that up.
So here's one of the most important questions I'm going to ask you. And that's, I don't always know the right questions. Like, what haven't I asked about in this whole subject of the digital kitchen, the transformation and AI and Southern hospitality? Like, what haven't I asked that you'd want to make sure that your peers in the industry that are tuning into the conversation today, that you'd want them to know?
So first thing is don't be afraid to fail. I think that it's okay to experiment with some things. I think you have to learn from your experiences. I've always said you learn from your mistakes. And so I always encourage my team. I say to them, don't be afraid. I think a lot of the younger generation sometimes they're afraid to fail. And I always say to people, if you make a mistake, don't worry. We'll get over it. You learn from that, you get better. From a technology perspective, I think that it's super important that we keep looking for the new thing. But I think that there are a lot of things that are just not there yet. We're close. Like AI, for example, in the drive-through, no one's hit that home run yet. It's getting closer. The experience is better, but it's not there. So I think we keep having to evolve. And as individuals, don't be afraid to be bold and drive some change and be a change engine in this industry. I think there's so much that goes on, especially in restaurants. I think we're in this digital revolution right now where there's going to be some big changes coming very soon. Every month, there's something new with AI and how it's evolving and it's getting much better and hallucinations are getting less and less. I think that we're getting a little bit more clarity on more accurate data and more points. But yeah, I think just in general, there's going to be this period where we're just going to really expand and we have to keep our eyes open and never stop learning. It's a constant challenge, but we've got to keep the door open and always be willing to learn.
If you could say throughout your career, what you've accomplished, what are you the most proud of that you've been able to do?
So it's a loaded question. I think there's a lot of great things I'm very proud of in my career, but I think the most impactful thing has been the development of the people that I've worked with. I've had some great teams and some great people, and being able to coach them and guide them and help them and see them grow has been probably the highlight of my career. Some of the most rewarding experiences. I've done some pretty cutting edge stuff. I rolled out the first enterprise point of sale in the US back in 2004, 2005. It was handhelds, pay at tables. It was an amazing experience. I opened up restaurants that did $160,000 a day in the waterfront in Boston. Done some really crazy stuff, but I think there's nothing more rewarding than the development of people and developing lifelong friends in this industry. It's a great place, but I love restaurants and just being a part of that has been the highlight of my career, I think. So there's not one single thing. I think I'm very proud of all the work that has been done with all my teams over the years.
So this whole thing has been leading up to the one most important question. And that as humans, we can only retain about two or three things at a time. And we've talked about so much so far in this conversation. If there was one takeaway out of everything that we've said that you wanted to leave your peer community with today, what would that one thing be?
It's a loaded question too. I think the one thing I would say is that remember that as a technologist, your job is to support those around you, but lead by example. And so when I say that, be bold, but also don't be afraid to fail and make sure that you're listening, right? And listen to what everyone is saying because the things that you can do to impact your teams are vast. And if you are willing to listen and understand their approach and provide them the right support and tools, you'll make such an impact on the things that they do day to day.
Yeah, words of wisdom for sure. The mission for the podcast is to bring different perspectives, different insights from different backgrounds, different industries together. And if we can all share, then we can all learn together. And that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I'd just like to say, I think you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. But I know there's going to be questions. If people have questions, is it okay if we give a link out to your LinkedIn profile so people could reach out and ask you?
I'd be happy and would enjoy the conversation.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with us. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for the invite. This has been fun and I appreciate the time.